Real estate from the bottom up. Investor made millions of dollars understanding market trends. I want to tackle two things with you, Jason. First is there a looming crisis? Number two, what will be the big trend that comes out of this?
Rick, great question. It's good to be here. The question when it comes to real estate is what type of real estate and where. There are three basic types of real estate markets in the entire world: linear, cyclical, and hybrid markets. The cyclical markets, meaning the expensive markets around the country, South Florida, the west coast of the United States, the expensive northeastern markets, they are in for trouble, especially if they are high density markets.
Well, this is my very first Jason Hartman conference. I've been listening to his podcasts and I have been learning a lot there, but already in the past couple hours, I've learned about what more to look for on pro formas. I've already learned quite a bit that I didn't know. And I'm looking forward to learning so much more the rest of this conference so that I can make better investments and make better choices in my investments.
Hi, I'm Jason Hartman, and I want to talk to you about some of the core teachings that have been very popular that I've been talking to the marketplace about for the past 14 years or so. My first set of core content is called the 10 Commandments of Successful Investing. And I created these so that there could be a core outline that you could really quantify and understand. If you understand these 10 commandments as an investor, you will do pretty well. It's not everything, but it's certainly a very, very good foundation. Then several years later, about 10 years ago, I did a second 10 commandments. So there were 20 at that time. And let's talk about one or two of them today for just a few moments. The first one sounds obvious, but let's unpack it a little bit. It is, thou shalt become educated. Thou shalt become educated. You know, education is obviously important. Nobody would deny that. But here's the thing. Education needs to be, number one, it needs to be practical and it needs to be actionable. Number two, it should be either very inexpensive or free. It's an amazing time to be alive, as I always say. And in the world today, information is plentiful and it's usually free. You know, there's an old saying, information wants to be free. Maybe you've heard that. And when it comes to learning how to be a good investor, you do not have to pay someone a fortune to buy their course or get their coaching program. Maybe you pay a little modest amount for good education of someone you already follow and know and like their teachings, and that's fine. But don't pay a lot. So again, practical and actionable, and free or cheap, one or the other. The second of the 10 commandments I want to talk about today is thou shalt have a team, a professional team. Now, you've probably heard people say this or suggest this in one form or another, and certainly having a team of people to help you do anything is beneficial in life, no question about it. But you want to have a team that is actually doing it. I remember one time I was being pitched for about an hour and 15 minutes or so on some guru's coaching program, and this was kind of funny. I asked him during the call. I said, you know, are you a real estate investor? He was pitching a real estate investing program, and I said, are you a real estate investor? You know, how many properties do you own? How much experience do you have? And he, as my potential coach, says to me, hey, look, you know, Tiger Woods has a coach and he's the world's best golfer. But here's the difference. And I replied with this. I said, look, I agree with you. Everybody needs a coach, even Tiger Woods. But the difference is Tiger Woods' coach has actually played golf. That's a big difference, right? So the person that is mentoring you or coaching you, or the person you're following and consuming their intellectual property, their content, should have actually played the game, right? Played the game. And they should have a whole team, they should just be part of the nucleus of this whole team of people that can help you with every aspect of your journey as an investor, especially as a real estate investor. Anyway, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to do that below. You can also comment or go to jasonhartman.com/ask and let us know what you think, or if you have any questions. Happy investing. Hey, I'm Jason Hartman, and I'm talking about the 10 commandments of successful investing. Today, we talked about commandment number 3 last time, thou shalt maintain control, be a direct investor. We talked about the importance of that. Today, let's go on and let's talk about commandment number 4, okay? Now, commandment number 4 is something that's kind of affiliated with the crooks on Wall Street, right? So I always say Wall Street is the modern version of organized crime, but they do have some very good things. There's some obviously extremely brilliant people on Wall Street, the quants, right? The people that really, really know their stuff. Literally rocket scientists, okay? If you saw the movie Margin Call, which is a great movie, by the way, the guy says, he was being asked by one of his superiors, who says, hey kid, this brilliant kid is in there analyzing the financial pools and all this kind of stuff. And he says, hey, what's your major? What's your background? And he says, well, I went to college to be a rocket scientist, quite literally. But you end up on Wall Street because that's where the money is, right? And so we see all of this kind of stuff, right? But one of the things Wall Street does pretty well is they utilize the art and science of financial planning. Now, financial planning in and of itself is a fantastic art and science, right? When you invest in something, before you get started as an investor, or if you're already moving along, maybe you want to just take a step back and look at the big picture, right? Look at the big picture. And in doing that, when it comes to financial planning, you need to consider your investment goals, your risk tolerance. There are some people that are very risk averse, very conservative, right? They want to just preserve. And that person might want to diversify more. There's an old saying, diversification perpetuates wealth and concentration creates wealth, right? So it depends what phase of your life you're in. If you've already made your money and maybe you're a little older, you want to just preserve and perpetuate. But if you're younger and you haven't made your money yet, maybe you got to take some bigger risk and you want to concentrate. There are 2 old sayings that come to mind in this vein. One is the one we've all heard, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Right?
All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. But the other saying that we missed out on there is put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket. And that one came from Andrew Carnegie, obviously a very successful business person. So today we've got a special guest. We've got one of our clients here with us, and that is Gary Pinkerton. Gary, how you doing?
Doing great. Looks like you got 2 of your clients with you there.
Well, Adam was a client, but he's graduated to an investment counselor. So I was going to introduce him as an investment counselor. Adam, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's good to see you again, Gary. Been a long time.
Yeah, it is. It's been a long time, my friend.
Gary, you'd think we coordinated this. I put the American flag background on, and you've got the American flag up. Now, you've got it up there for probably a sort of a different reason, right? Because you spent a lot of your life defending that flag, and we want to thank you for your service. It's just always an honor to talk to military people, or ex-military in this case. And as I have long said, but you don't like to talk about it, you're so modest and humble. Gary used to captain a nuclear submarine. Gosh, that's incredible. Adam, don't you think that's incredible? Gary's so quiet about it and reserved,
I'm just glad I didn't ever have to fire anything like that.
Me too.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, hey, everybody, cheers. This is Coffee Talk, so take your sip. Gary just took his, everybody. Yep, there you go. Let's get nicely caffeinated here. And please post your questions if you're watching on YouTube. Comment down below, and we will get to your questions. If you're watching on any one of a number of our Facebook channels, go ahead and put a comment in there. And we've already got a couple of them coming in, so we will definitely get to those. Mitch Russo says, totally agree. And Martin says, yo. And and Tyler says, good morning. And we got a bunch of others coming in. So
these comments tell me not everybody's caffeinated yet.
Yeah, thanks for all your comments and questions, folks. Hey, so I want to kind of get into a few things here. But the first one is I want to congratulate Gary because he just made the move. He moved his family from New Jersey to beautiful Florida, the Sunshine State, where it is tax-free. Gary, how do you feel about that move?
I feel pretty awesome. I got my Florida coffee mug. It is by Starbucks, so there's a little mixed, not an intended mixed message, but I got Florida on my coffee cup.
Nice.
I'm extremely excited. The kids maybe not so much so yet. Not about the state of Florida or the fact that we're sitting here in a beautiful canal. More so about kind of leaving their friends, and first time they've moved in a really long time, half their life, right? So I think about, guys, what's the big deal? We just moved. But it has been half their life since we moved last. And so I did spend 10 years in that environment. And we came up with some great friends up there. Very, very, beautiful area we lived in on the Jersey Shore. Great friends, but the government and the taxation was just too much for me, and the political kind of environment. So, your discussion last week with Patrick, I think it was last week, but with Patrick Donahoe, another, two of the guys that I would put in my, top 5 of people who have helped me get on a much, much better journey in my life. You talked about people flooding out of New York City to suburban areas, and that's exactly what we experienced with our home. We had people standing on the sidewalk trying to buy our home, and a bidding war, and selling it close to 20% above what we asked for it. And we found ourselves homeless. And it was somewhat by design. I wanted to get out, so the timing was tremendous. We feel very fortunate. I paid almost as much in local and state taxes for 2019 as I did in federal. And so it was just time for me to get out.
Wow, that's just incredible. But Gary, when you talk about a bidding war, you're saying that because you were basically in a New York suburb. That's the way you're talking about that, right?
Yeah. We shut things down on like day 2. We started off with like 3 or 4 showings on the first day. That turned into 10 showings the first day. On the second day, by the time we got to the second day, they had compressed down showing times where every 30 minutes people were kind of standing there waiting on their turn to come through. And then we just shut it down and said, everybody give us your best offer. And 14 of the offers were above asking price. People waived things like appraisals. And so the reason I'm bringing this up, definitely not to brag, it's to bring about the point that there is a fever to leave urban areas. Like you mentioned last week, you nailed it last week. And you said there's really 2 things going on. It's social unrest. People are literally fleeing because they fear for their families' well-being. And then it's just not wanting to be in that kind of tight area. So if you can commute to a major city from there, you have valuable land.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I even wonder, Gary, if you need to be able to commute to a major city. I think everybody has realized that going to an office is totally overrated.
Yeah.
And like I've been saying on the podcast, is that COVID-19 has just accelerated creative destruction. I talk a lot about Joseph Schumpeter being one of my favorite economists, and he coined that term creative destruction. And, we're creatively destroying the idea that you need to go to an office. We're creatively destroying all kinds of old ideas that would have happened anyway, and they were gradually happening, but this has just completely accelerated the whole thing. And on the screen here, I put this, yet another. There are so many. I just almost hate to even point them out anymore, because every day we're just hit with this barrage of stuff. But another article talking about how people are fleeing New York, and this is about a moving company that said that their moving business has increased 46%
from this time last year. And the moves out of New York City, okay, are up 50%. Okay, so very significant. Not, sometimes a lot of their moves would be within the city, right? But these are there is a mass migration out, and people are just voting with their feet. I did this with California. It's been happening with California for a couple of decades. I did it 9 years ago, never looked back. And I remember posting on Facebook when I drove across the Arizona into the Arizona border the day I left California, that my state income taxes just dropped by 69%. And Arizona isn't tax-free. I wanted to live in a tax-free state. I tried Nevada, didn't like it so much. I'm definitely not a Las Vegas type person, and so now Florida, but Adam's already living in a no income tax state. He lives in Austin, Texas, and now Gary, you and Sue and your kids live in a no income tax state. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. And I remember back after 2008 and 9. Where's the safe place to buy, real estate where there are people with jobs, right? So I remember the U-Haul first time. You definitely talked about it numerous times on your podcast, Jason, about, track the U-Haul one-way moves, right? And so I had to go several towns away, a long distance, to pick up my U-Haul, and I reserved it a month out as soon as we had it off in the house.
And I bet it was expensive too.
Yep, it was expensive.
How much was that?
700 and something, 900 and some dollars just for a medium-sized little trailer.
To go all the way to Florida? Oh, just a trailer, not even a truck.
Oh yeah, not a truck.
Wow. A truck would have been $1,800, I bet.
Yeah, and then when I got down here to Tampa, they were, initially when I was moving, they said, just drop your U-Haul at any U-Haul place that's close. Well, then they contacted me and said, hey, we need to coordinate this because we're not sure there's room. And when we show up, there are just trailers and trucks everywhere where people have, dropped them coming down here. So.
Yeah. U-Haul, they have a lot of these one-way moves, and they have a real problem getting their trucks back into the other state. And they're paying, college kids and all kinds of things to move them back, to drive them back. So it's a real significant problem for them. Very, very interesting. But folks, this trend is going to continue. It is going to become even more and more significant. And, it's not just about the high density living that people are trying to avoid. Of course, they don't want to be in elevators. They don't want to be in mass transit because these are the danger zones. And everything else is a danger zone when you're in a big city because just everything is literally crowded. But it's also an issue of civil unrest. And if you think about it, when I moved to Arizona in 2011, I finally got to live in the type of area I always wanted to live in, a walkable community. And it was really fun. I just totally enjoyed it. You could walk to the coffee shop, you could walk to restaurants, you'd see your friends walking. It was fun. It was really neat. But even that walkable community concept, I don't think that's so desirable anymore because all of the things that made it great were really the retailers, and now they aren't there. Or if you do go out to a restaurant, it's just not a very pleasant experience with everyone wearing a mask, and it's just kind of dystopian. So the things that all make New York expensive are what? Great restaurants, fine dining, high income employment, Broadway plays, etc., and shopping on Fifth Avenue, and that's all shut down. And with the civil unrest and the broken glass that you've seen and the boarding up all these stores on Fifth Avenue in New York, those businesses, a lot of them will just never reopen. Why would they want to reopen? They won't even be able to get insurance policies. Their insurance companies will not give them insurance, or if they do, it will be so expensive. So the question really becomes, why live there? All the desirability of that stuff has been just eliminated. And so it's we're living in a historic time, everybody, where things have just massively changed. Things have been totally disrupted. And even after there's a vaccine, even after things get to the new normal, whatever that is, I say that there's going to be a post-traumatic stress disorder for many years to come. And it is going to show itself in all sorts of ways. And I think we will wake up to a smaller economy. I don't think things are going back to the way they were anytime soon. So, any thoughts on that, Gary?
I agree. I mean, innovation always comes out of it's one of the beauties that comes out of stressful situations, and so I think across the country, people are learning how to be more efficient, about not have to go into offices. About one of the things that they're marketing on homes down here now, well, probably across the country, is hey, the home office, right? That any house that they can call something a home office. Sometimes they're taking fourth bedrooms or third bedrooms and convert them into nice home offices, so you can see that this is the house for you, right? So that, I mean, it's consistent across the country. So I guess I would call myself an opportunist to learn from Jason. I call myself an optimist as well, because I can see I try to focus on the good that comes out of all situations. So I don't think we're going back the way we were. That's a guarantee. How will it be different? We're going to be more nimble. There's a lot of places. There's going to be a lot of things turned into parking lots. It used to be commercial buildings. I think I agree with you completely on a lot of businesses that are going the way of Amazon. So yeah, there's a lot of change. I agree. I don't think it's all bad. In fact, I think a lot of it's good. I think when you have cancer, it's not painful it's not easy. It is painful to get rid of the cancer. And we have a lot of kind of social cancer going on right now. And it's going to be painful to come out of it. But those people who are producers will help us get out of it. And that's, Jason, you mentioned about how I'm humble and I don't like talking about the submarine stuff. Well, if you count behind me, there's like 4, intentional representations. I'm a little less humble now because I feel like action needs to be taken. Action needs to be taken. So I feel like, it's time to step up and do it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, hey, Gary, I know a lot of this is top secret. It's classified, but I gotta just ask you, because this is interesting to all the listeners, tell us something interesting about, captaining a nuclear submarine. Just tell us something that's not top secret. Any close calls, any interesting stuff. I mean, come on, you got to have literally, this is the reason they call them war stories. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I'll just let you use your own imagination, I guess, on close calls. But close calls happen all the time with submarines. And so it's all about managing risk, because you close the hatch, and unlike an airplane, which is like as thin as it's basically an aluminum can. Think about a Coke can, and then reach up and squeeze the Coke can, right? I mean, how easy is that to crush? Well, the reason airplanes don't crush is because they have to change the pressure inside them. We don't do that on submarines, nor could you change the pressure and keep the humans surviving to the level that you have to with water on the outside. Go back to your physics class and remember the density of water compared to the density of air.
Yeah.
So that the pressure on the outside of the hull of a submarine is hundreds of pounds, depending on how deep you go, right? And so if you get a hole in that, I mean, you can lose the whole thing, right? So so the reason I say you're always at risk is because, listen, if things get really nasty on a surface ship or somewhere else, even 9/11, a horrific event, but you can leave your building if you're not in that one, and you can get to safety, and there's air and there's sunlight, and you can kind of continue. Not true under the ocean. So there's lots of close calls that occur, and we drive around with no windows. And then the one, I guess, is the imagination part of it. We go places where the country needs us to go, right? To gain intelligence, to protect surface ships and things. And those are places where we're not going to share we're there, right? So if there's other people who have submarines and you're not telling them where you are and you don't have any windows, right? Obviously, there's close calls that occur. So something that's interesting, right? So I found this interesting. Maybe a lot of guys would find this interesting. My wife shut me down totally. So it's more of a funny, humbling story. At some point, I was telling this story. I was like, I want to be a captain of a submarine one day. Like, this is 10 years before I got one.
And you became one.
Yeah. And so she asked me, like, why is, what's the big deal? And as I named off a few things, but now I was like, and it's like it's your own country almost. Okay, this was a little bit of hubris here, but I was like, I can change the time zone. Like the president of the U.S., some other country, they can change the time zone, but I can just wake up and say, you know what, we're going on Western time, or we're going on Pacific time right now.
Right.
And she was like, that's stupid. Nor is it exciting. So anyway, I thought it was cool. She thought it was pretty stupid.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
that's
I think
why you're
it's
captain.
I think it's way more impressive that you have launch codes. Okay, that's
Yeah, that's the part we don't talk about, though, right?
that's incredible. That's incredible. Is it really like the movies where there's you as the captain and one other officer, and you both have two keys that are on different sides of the submarine where you have to launch the missiles and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of Hollywood, but
Yeah.
it's the concept is there. It certainly takes more than one individual. It takes 4 or 5
Oh,
to
okay.
to actually meet the requirements to do it legally. But if people had guns, like in Crimson Tide, right, where there's a mutiny thing going on,
I love
right?
that movie. Yeah.
Then it can physically be 2 people. If you get both of them, you could do it.
Yeah, or Hunt for Red October. That's another great one. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Gary, thanks for sharing those stories. That's just awesome. It's fascinating. And Naresh is going to be joining us in a moment, and then we're going to have a lot from Adam and Naresh. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. But hey, I wanted to get into. I'm going to share the screen here, and what is that? I thought I was sharing this.
Can I talk about one walkable thing that you were talking about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to you're talking about building the walkable communities, ever since COVID has happened, I've noticed just in neighborhoods, even though like in Austin, everything is tied to cars because everything's crazy far apart.
Yeah.
But the walkability and the people I've seen walking and the neighbors that I've met through it has skyrocketed since people have been working from home. So it's actually the suburbs are becoming more of a community.
Mm-hmm.
Just in that you're seeing your neighbors. It's kind of like in Houston after we went through a hurricane. I got to know all my neighbors because nobody was going to work. Nobody had power. Everybody was outside. And there's the economy. I don't agree with you. I think we're going to have a bigger economy than before as more people start their own businesses and gain skills. I think our economy is going to.
That's a good point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Adam, because that's one thing we do need to realize, and I have mentioned that. A lot of people have been using this time to improve themselves, to learn a new skill. Maybe they're learning how to, maybe it's an Uber driver who didn't have like a unique, highly marketable skill, and now they've started an online business, or they've become a programmer. I mean, you can learn all this great stuff at home nowadays. And so in many ways, that is true. And also, as I talked about on either a podcast or a YouTube video or something, maybe here on a live stream in a prior week, the savings rate has skyrocketed. And, that really does. It's not good initially because the economy is built on spending. 70% of the S&P 500 is basically consumer spending, right? But long term, you got to have capital formation to create wealth in a society. So there definitely are a lot of good things coming out of this, Adam, and that's one of them. The interesting thing, though, is, and I've been to your home. You invited me to stay there for a few days, I remember, and thank you for having me. And you and your wife live in a nice suburban area where you can't walk to any retail, but people are walking around the neighborhood now because they're home. And so that's an interesting point. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Gary, if you see on the screen, I've got your slides up, and I just wanted to maybe go through these a little bit. You've got some stuff to share with us. Your post-military career is in the investment side of the business. So talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah, most of what I do is insurance-based financial planning. I work partner with Patrick Donahoe, Paradigm Life, and I started off there as a client 2011 when I was buying my first properties. That was even slightly before I met Jason, and the whole turnkey approach, kind of trying to do it on my own with the first one. That didn't go well. And so I got a team behind me, and I bought, we got in the end, less than 10 years later, we had 10 in my wife Susan's name, 10 in my name. I was repositioning money from the market. So it's, I didn't make all of that down payment at the time. And it worked tremendously well. And I will always keep single family homes. And that's my core. But along the way, I decided that I didn't want as much of my own money. I just wanted to get more efficient. I wanted less of my money in from a risk perspective, from an efficiency. I think everyone who's read Rich Dad, Poor Dad gets the concept that if you have none of your own money in the deal and it still cash flows, even $1, it's an infinite return. So I was kind of looking for both efficiency on my dollars and asset protection. And so I found this approach of storing my money in a different location. And so that made the biggest difference for me. And when I was 4 years into the process of real estate and focusing on personal finance, taking back control. That's a big thing for me, is having control of my finances. Because in 08 and 09, I was busy paying attention to commanding a submarine and being out in the Pacific. And I paid no attention. Like I'm embarrassed to tell you how many months it was after the 2008 and 9 market crash before I knew it even happened. But it taught me that no matter how much you think the other guy has your interests at heart, he has his interests at heart. And maybe you're aligned with him, which would be good. But there's nothing in life that we can just stand back and say, I'm handing this off to somebody else. I can completely give up accountability for it. The guy, one of, obviously figuratively one of my mentors, but the program that I was in for 30 years, Hyman G. Rickover's Nuclear Navy. And one of the things he said is that responsibility is a unique concept. You can share it with others, but you never give up your accountability part of it. Like if you can't point a finger at somebody and say that person was responsible, you really never had anybody responsible. And in our own investments, our own family finances, all of the adults, at least the one who is the breadwinner, right? But I think all of the adults, it's your job to make sure that you provide for the family, right? So you can never hand the thing off completely. And that's something I learned big time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
and by the way, Gary, I'd just like to dovetail on that. What you're referring to is when you started investing with us back in 2011 or 2012?
Yeah, 11.
Okay. And now you were last time I think you were on the podcast, and I think you said you had 22 properties. Do you? How many do you have now?
It was 21 and 31 doors. And we actually just moved out of St. Louis for the same reason that people moved out of New York City and bought my house. It was just a tough area, and somebody had a better feeling for it than I did. And so I let them have it. And so we're kind of on the market again. We're looking for moving back into investment properties. We all do things for different reasons.
Sure.
I buy investment properties because I learned as a child the impact of inflation. It basically made us homeless. And in my sophomore year in high school. And so I've always wanted to offset inflation, leveraged offsetting of inflation. And any of Jason's podcasts about the Ten Commandments will let you know why that is. So I will always have the majority of my money invested personally. So we're down to 16 buildings, about 20 to 22 properties.
Excellent. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how those properties just keep working for you behind the scenes? That's why I love income properties. They're great. Well, tell us a little bit about, by the way, I just wanted to dovetail on what you were saying. Gary's kind of hearkening back to my commandment number 3, which is thou shalt maintain control, be a direct investor, own properties directly, control them. Don't delegate it to some guy on Wall Street, who, like you said, their interests may be aligned with yours. Usually it's not. Usually there's a misalignment of interest, and that's a big problem in anything, in business, in investing, in whatever. That's why you want to be a direct investor. So you are in control. And, at our Meet the Masters conference just over a month ago, we launched our new brand, the Empowered Investor. And it's not just about being in control, but being empowered. And so we've talked about that a little bit. But Gary, take us through this diagram, if you would, and tell us about it.
Yeah, so this comes from Patrick Donahoe's book. It's actually an adaptation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So his pyramid of needs that you talked about actually last week, you talked about food, shelter, clothing, right? And why shelter is never going to go away. And so that makes it kind of a fundamental direct investment. At the foundation below that, right? So are my investments doing well? Sure, they're doing great. But if they're all illiquid and I have no savings, no reserves for that, no ability to react or respond when the world throws a curveball at you, you're still at risk of complete being ejected from the financial pyramid, which is falling off the bottom of the thing. So my day job is this savings and protection, which again, like Maslow's, is food, shelter, and clothing. If you have enough savings and you have enough protection from bad things happening, auto insurance for getting hammered, on your way home and your family losing that income, right? My side is actually the life insurance side. So it protects from that loss of 30, 40 more years of income for your family from you producing value in the world and getting paid for it. So we're on the savings and protection side, but I talk to my clients all the time about tiers 2 and above. And that was a big aha moment for me. And it taught me why I was in such a mess in 2008, 9, and 10 until I got things turned around. And so our premise, after meeting with hundreds and hundreds of clients and looking at our own financial situation, is that there's basically 3 levels of investing. You've got directly owned investing, right? Be a direct investor. That's one of Jason's 10 commandments. And then above that is indirect investing, and then at the top is speculation. And there's a lot of people play in all of these realms. Sadly, in America, we've been convinced to play in the speculation role, and it's there's a lot of reasons behind that, but there's a lot of people, a lot of famous people like Mr. Dave Ramsey, who will say life insurance is a horrible investment. You should buy term insurance, invest your difference in the market. And so there's a lot of people who are incentivized to push towards that. To me, the very top of this pyramid. And let me back up just real quick. So why are they in these different levels? It's because there's this relationship, an inverse relationship between how much control and insight you have and how much risk is being taken on. You could take the same little rental property that I bought through Jason's network, and I could put it in any one of these tiers, right? So quick example, I own the property. Is it a good idea to paint it purple and sell it to some guys who are running, a crack house inside it? No, it's a bad idea. And I'm not going to make that choice because I'm directly involved and I'm educated on the approach, right? But what if I sell it to Adam? He gets a different idea. Hey, this guy said if I rent it to him for twice as much, so now I'm an indirect investor. I didn't actually, I invested in Adam's thing. He's like, Gary, I'll sell it to me and carry back the mortgage. Well, now all of a sudden I'm indirect, right? But then what if Adam says that was a bad idea? He sells it to a hedge fund. Now the hedge fund, we don't even know what the hedge fund guys are doing. I can't call them. I could call Adam. So I'm kind of a backseat driver for Adam, trying to give advice. He doesn't have to listen to me because I'm no longer in control, but he might listen to me, right? And I could at least vet the individual. But then when he sells it off to a hedge fund and I have my money in a REIT or something, I don't even know who owns it or even what property it is. I don't even recognize it's the same one.
Yeah, and a REIT is a real estate investment trust, a non-direct investment. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I talk to my clients all the time about that. But again, my day job is that foundation at the bottom. It is helping people save and grow money in a much better location. I learned a huge thing, and I just in March of this year, and then I just kept relearning it. So all of the mayors in every city I own real estate stood in front of a camera and said, renters, we know you guys are hurting. You don't have to pay your rent. But no one stood in front of the camera and said,
landlords, yeah,
landlords, right? You don't have to pay your mortgage, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I can vividly remember looking at my wife, Sue, and saying, that should be interesting. And she said, what are we going to do? And so I went and did the math, and we just happened to walk into March with a whole bunch of money sitting in the foundation of our pyramid, right? It was all sitting in real estate. I had intended to make some investments I didn't end up making. And I did the math and I said, well, as long as this doesn't make it through like 2021, like somebody starts paying rent by that point, I've got a couple years worth of reserves to pay these mortgages. And then I just kept day after day meeting with clients, and people were either scared. It was polarizing, right? Obviously, March and April were polarizing. So people were either scared out of their wits or they were comfortable looking for deals. And the difference in those two is your ability to stay calm, right? And what keeps your head calm? It's probably different for everyone. For me, it's about having a lot of money sitting on the sideline and confidence that no one else is going to control whether that works or not. So, it spoke to me, and that's why I'm running the new podcast you saw on the first page. It's why I'm trying to make a call out to other people who are interested in controlling their own destiny, and kind of get back to the basics of America.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I love this. The control aspect on one side of the pyramid, the risk aspect on another, and we're tier 2 direct investing. Yep. So good stuff. That's a great diagram. And we'll talk about the 3 buckets in a moment. I want to welcome Naresh on. Naresh, are you ready? Naresh is with us too. We got all 4 of us here today. So Naresh, how you doing?
Doing all right. Good morning, everyone. Good to be here.
And you may not know this, Naresh, but Gary now lives in Tampa. So you guys are neighbors. Naresh is in Tampa too. You got to get together. I
didn't know that.
Yeah. No, he just moved. He just voted with his feet and left New Jersey. So good decision, Gary. That's great. Good stuff. So Naresh, we'll get to you and Adam. I know we got a lot to talk about today, but we're kind of going through some of Gary's stuff here. So Gary, tell us about these 3 buckets.
Yeah, if you just build through that whole thing, I meant to just give you pictures of all this, but you mentioned something. We talk all the time about should we hold real estate in retirement accounts, or should we put a large amount of our money in retirement accounts? My answer is always, hey, no, but you probably want to know how to invest with that because your money's already there. Kind of like I woke up 20 years after starting my adult life. The money's there. So how do we deal with the fact that it's already there? The reason I don't like putting more money there is because it's jail, right? It's under congressional control. And every time that we do a tax deduction or we do something where we have to protect that with revenue. A classic example is the 2018 tax law change that came out shortly after that, which was tremendous, right? But it did reduce revenue to the federal government. And so immediately following that, Congress did exactly what they have done every time before, in which they will have to do going forward, because it's the only place that there are trillions of dollars of private wealth in America. They had to go to that coffer. So I call it Congress's playground. And so they came out with something called the Secure Act. And the Secure Act said, hey, inherited IRAs, you can no longer stretch that out over your working lifetime. You have to pay the taxes on it within 10 years. They actually wanted 5 years, and the Senate version didn't end up having that. But I think it's going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. And it's kind of in that you didn't earn that money, kind of concept, right? So why would they want to?
It's like Obama. You didn't build that.
That's right. You didn't build that.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why would they want to make you distribute over the first few years as opposed to some other random time, right? Well, they get the money earlier, obviously. But let's think about when our parents pass away in today's world, what are we doing? We're in our highest earning years. So if the government can figure out a way to have somebody who's in their 40% tax bracket pay a lot more and have all of this earned income come in from retirement accounts in the highest tax bracket, it's substantially their benefit. They're not getting this money dribbling in a 15% tax bracket. They're getting it coming in at the highest possible tax bracket.
So the a couple comments here. Number one, understand that if your eyes are rolling back in your head right now, you better not have some coffee or something, okay? Because the single largest expense in anybody's life is tax. It's some form of tax that we pay, and whether it bores us or it bores most people, and that's why I say that. We had better learn about how to save on taxation, how to cut our tax bill, because it's the largest expense we have. It's more important than getting a good deal on the next property you buy. It's more important than getting a good deal on the next car you buy, or more important than getting a good deal on the next computer you buy. Right? Taxes are the single largest expense you have. So very important there. And understand that it is very difficult to live under a government that is hungry for money. And virtually every government in the world is in financial trouble. Okay. Now, the way you can help this a little bit is by getting yourself into a low tax nexus. So I know we have viewers and listeners from all over the world right now. Last week we had one of our viewers on from Bahrain. I mean, people in Asia, Europe, everywhere, right? But if you're in the US, and all I can speak for is the US about this, get into a no or a low income tax state, a business friendly state. Like I did, like Gary just did, like Naresh did. He used to live in Maryland. So, you see this trend of people moving to these lower tax environments and then use vehicles and structuring to reduce your tax bill further, because it is the largest expense. And I'll just tell you something. Years ago, I used to have a boat, a yacht, literally a yacht, right? Because it's over 40 feet, so you can call it a yacht, okay? And that's when I lived in Southern California. And I swore I would never buy another boat. And then I moved to Florida, and I thought, just for the money I save on state income taxes, I can easily pay for a very nice yacht again, right? Just for the state income tax money. And so, you can justify a lot of these pleasures in life by just saving on taxes. And income property is the most tax favored asset class in the country. But Gary, you've got some ways that people can reduce taxes as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly real estate is a great version, but I'm passionate about reducing taxes. I mean, I finally, I felt like a hypocrite living where I was and doing that. So like I said, I got extremely inspired. I'm starting a new podcast. I loved doing heroic investing with you, Jason. It was one of my, the treasures of what I've done in my lifetime. Yet I needed to talk about this other voice as well. So I've stepped away from that so that I can incite people to action to get us back, to turn the ship back to where our founding fathers had it. if you think about these guys risk their lives just crossing the ocean, right? And then they risk their lives in signing a document that was a death wish, right? Because they said, strongest, most powerful guy in the world, we are seceding from you, right? And in the past, they've attacked, and they attacked here, but it was all for like 7 to 15% taxes.
I can't imagine the little snowflakes we have in all the colleges around the country doing that today. I mean,
I know.
Can you imagine one of these snowflakes in a college or university environment saying something like, "Give me liberty or give me death"? Like, never. It's like, give me Starbucks or I'll whine and cry. This is unbelievable what the country has turned into. It's pathetic.
So I'm
frankly.
super inspired seeing 3 other people on here that are in no tax states, right? And that's just a first step. One of the reasons I have this flag back here is because I don't want people to misunderstand that I'm all of a sudden a conscientious objector and I hate everything that our government does. I love our government, but I also understand that I love ice cream, and I have to prevent myself from having as much ice cream as I'd like to have, right? And so one of the things that makes me a little nervous, because I've always felt like my peers, my dear friends that I've served alongside, are going to misunderstand, and they're going to think that I'm not patriotic anymore and that I've, lost my noodle or something. But
there's a difference, and I think you'll agree with this. There's a difference between loving your country and its foundational principles and objecting to certain things the government of the moment is doing. There's a huge difference. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I love the country. Listen, I wasn't born in America. I was born in Europe. Okay. But the whole American concept is so unique in history. I mean, before the US came along, the only document really ever codified in history that gave individual rights to people was the Magna Carta a couple hundred years earlier, right? Or don't quote me on the exact time. I think it was like 1100, so a few hundred years earlier. And then the Constitution came along with this totally out of left field concept that people should actually have rights and people should take rights away from the government.
Right.
Like, that was a radical idea. No one ever thought of that before. Okay. And we really got to respect that. I mean, that's an incredible thing.
There's a great,
and it became contagious around the world, by the way. That's the other thing. So if you're not listening to this or watching this in the United States, that became a contagion to make the world just a much more democratic place. So yeah, go ahead.
And there's so many more beautiful examples of it. I was listening to a podcast recently, and I haven't researched this too much, but he was talking about having lived recently in Vietnam. And he said, it's like 200 years ago in America where they said we should have a flat tax, and they just did it, to free up business and free up business production and adding value. And, it's tremendous. And so back to, one of the things that makes me uncomfortable is I had this position at the Joint Chiefs, my last major position. And I kind of joke that we were head toy makers. Like, we were evaluating new weapon systems, new pieces of equipment that the branches of service wanted to bring in. And I'm telling you, we were throwing away, making obsolete things that were better 10 years ahead of where any other country was going to go, in my opinion. And the reason we were doing it is because we had a big budget and we wanted it to get bigger. And just like every other organism on the planet, when an entity is created, I don't care if it's a branch of Uber, when that entity is created, their success is measured by, do they expand and do they sustain? Like, if your branch gets cut in the military or in the government or anywhere else, that's failure, right? So everyone, for good reason, they take their human traits of survival and they put it out there to this organization. So the same thing's happening in the government. And you're not successful if your budget's not bigger than it was last year, right? And so going back to me eating ice cream, if the listeners wonder where the heck that was going, right? I learned that we need to put this wonderful, amazing government in this beautiful country we have on a diet. And if I can help other people put it on a diet and focus those dollars back towards themselves, I think we are turning ever so slightly the country back to what our founding fathers wanted. I mean, in the end, I don't want to run for public office. I want to talk to the individual and have that individual help us come out of this. If Patrick, if you are Jason, I'm sorry, if you go way back to the beginning, about what Patrick and I kind of stand for, it's the picture of Gary's Gulch. Like a lot of people who haven't read Ayn Rand don't know what I'm talking about.
Galt's Gulch.
Right, Galt's Gulch.
Yeah,
Exactly.
not Gary's Gulch. You're naming it after yourself.
I know, I stole it.
Yeah.
Totally stole it. But yeah, the Liberty Bell on my podcast says Gary's Gulch, and it's because I want to talk to those people. I want to talk to people who are producers, right? And so anyway, that's what I'm focused on. That's how I think we get back to the basics, to this amazing thing we used to have.
So the idea is that it is patriotic to take every tax deduction you can take, because then you put the beast on a diet, and the beast is government. It just naturally, any government, not just ours, it just grows. And that's just the nature of things. Any organization seeks to expand its power, its influence, and its ability to interfere with other people and their life. And that's just the nature of it. We've got to understand that's how government just acts. It's not,
how we all act.
And it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Okay, so how can we put it on a diet? Just tell us this slide. Like, what do we need to learn here?
Well, we take personal action, like you just said. It is patriotic to learn about your own personal taxes, and then take actions that help you reduce that. So on this slide, if you're starting, or you're talking to a young individual who is starting to save money, or you're thinking about these next dollars, should I be putting them into my 401k or IRA? People will talk about Roth IRAs could be in that bucket with permanent tax-free money, right? The point about this is that if you need to distribute $80,000, you don't get that much to live on. So you got to distribute a lot more on the left-hand side, depending on whatever the tax brackets are at the time, right? So you want to move money over time, especially during your working years, from a place where you haven't yet paid taxes on it, and there's a lot of unknowns about what you will pay, into a place where you have control, there's no limitations, and you've already paid the taxes, right? So get it into a permanent tax-free bucket and allow it to grow tax-free. So life insurance does that. It has always done that. It was around before the creature from Jekyll Island and before we started the US tax code. And because all wealthy members of America, the individuals who were driving the boats I just saw on this huge Trump parade off of Fort Myers yesterday.
Yeah, I saw those yesterday too. That was very inspiring. But on Lake Travis in Austin, where Adam is, Adam, you probably know this, a bunch of those boats actually sank. And I'll bet you,
it didn't work out too well.
I'll bet you the Democrats, knew who was going to be in the parade and put holes in those boats or something. I mean, that's just crazy. Like, boats hardly ever sink. That's so rare. It's unbelievable, especially on a lake. Adam, do you know the details about that? I think it was Democrat sabotage. That's your team.
It's apparently common knowledge that Lake Travis, because the way it's set up, when you get a bunch of boats out on it, the wakes get absolutely terrible. So they just didn't do their research, apparently.
I wonder if it was.
I'm not a boater, so I don't know.
Okay. All right.
It's a good reminder that it's not going to be pretty, right? I'm not saying this is a cakewalk, but I'm saying it's necessary. We had when we were at Meet the Masters, and you had Rand Paul there.
Yeah.
Ron Paul. Excuse me, Ron Paul, not his dad, Ron Paul.
Yeah.
So incredibly inspiring. But one of the things I remember him saying is that, listen, and G. Edward Griffin is a great podcast where he talks to Patrick Donahoe about this on Wealth Standard about a year ago now. It's not simple. It's not utopia when you have a situation where you can't control your neighbors, right? And Ron Paul talked about that. He said, listen, it's not beautiful. Like, you have to be willing to let your neighbor play loud music and work on his car engine in the front yard. Like, that's what individualism.
Unless you live in an HOA. Yeah.
Right. And so, G. Edward Griffin talks about, listen, in this, free society that we started way back when, the Constitution says that, the rights are for the people, like you said a few minutes ago, Jason. But when you walk that out, anything that's not specifically given to government is the people's rights. And I don't have the ability to stop you, Jason, on a motorcycle and say, you got to put a helmet on or I'm going to take you to jail. And therefore I can't delegate that to my government.
Right. But right? if you have socialized health care, I think you do have a right to tell that guy not to drive a motorcycle at all, because he's about to cost the public a lot of money if you have a socialized healthcare system.
If you do.
So, yeah,
exactly right. But then you got to go back to, is that an entering argument? Did the founding fathers want socialized?
Obviously not. We don't have to even go there.
Right?
that's, if you want people to die waiting in line like they do in England and Canada. But, I'm sure I'll get some arguments about that. Listen, folks, I have heavily researched this stuff. I have had many guests on my show over the last 15 years, experts talking about all of this stuff. But hey, the questions are piling up. We better take some questions here. And Gary, we'll get back to this slide because this looks really interesting. Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, and what a miracle it is. But I just don't want to have people waiting too terribly long for some of these questions. So let me just get to that in a moment. I'm going to put Naresh back on here. Naresh, you're back. I hope you got your lighting fixed up a little bit. And let's grab some questions here, folks. And we'll get to some of these. So here we go. Okay, great video, guys. Okay, thank you, Martin. Appreciate it. Paul Lund says good morning. And I love this one. My tinfoil hat, says New Manatee Friends. What does that mean? Does my tinfoil hat live in Tampa? Is that what
I think he
means?
does.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
He'll never admit it, though.
Don't tell people where you live. Okay, so Tyler says, my investor friend told me he hasn't renewed leases and is forcing them month to month to make it possible for them to get out in 30 days. Yeah, and Tyler, I know you put that question up when we were talking about commercial leases in New York. So I think that's what you might be talking about. Maybe it's residential leases. I'm not sure. But if this, and we got to get to the CDC. I've got slides on this and everything, so that is one of the topics. So we might circle back to that a little bit, but that's interesting because then you can say, if you're the landlord, you can say, look, I'm not evicting anybody. I'm just giving them 30 days notice and saying, you got to move, and they just coincidentally happen to be not paying. So that's an interesting point. Okay, Dell.
But then all they have to do is not leave, and then you have to kick them out, and that's going to be a whole
different
ballgame. And then you're not actually, if you do that, then it's potential they may not have to do the back rent that you would be able to collect via the CDC.
By the way, the CDC thing requires very specific documents. So it's not, I think investors are overreacting to that. They really are. So we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so we got that one. Dell says, hi all, where do you see the markets prior to, I think you meant, the elections and after, metal shares and Bitcoin, etc.? Cheers. Well, I think if Joe Biden wins, it'll be a disaster for the country. But Adam probably disagrees because, hey, we got to have our resident lefty here, and that's Adam. He lives in Austin. He can't help it. He lives in Austin. Come on, it's a super liberal place. Adam, what say you? If Trump wins, it'll be a disaster. That's what you're going to say.
No, I mean, in my regard, it's more who wins. If the Democrats win the House, the Senate, and the presidency,
oh my gosh,
you could. That's going to be. I think the markets will. I think the markets will initially trend down, but it just depends on how the spending goes. Honestly, it's not necessarily who's in charge; it's how the spending goes. Because right now, you're talking about the savings rate earlier, and the savings rate is up so much. A lot of it because people are getting an injection of cash from the government in the terms of the expanded unemployment that we had and the stimulus checks, but there's nothing to spend it on. So they've either saved it or they've paid down their debt. So it's caused an explosion of private savings. So when the economy opens back up again and people are able to go out, it's probably going to go back to how it was before.
Well, I think what you'll see, though, folks, I just want to warn everybody to be cautious of this, because I think what we'll see, and we already got a hint of this when the sort of the serious lockdowns lifted a bit and the reopening began, we saw the housing market just boom, and it's still booming. I mean, the housing market is en fuego. It's on fire. There's like absolutely so little inventory, and buyers are snapping everything up outside of these high density cities that they're leaving. But even in some of these expensive cyclical markets, as long as they're more suburban or at least not high density, they're doing pretty well too. Housing is really hot, but some of that
is just pent up demand, because we never had a spring selling season or spring buying season, depending on how you look at it, which is always traditionally the busiest time in the real estate market. So, and that's true of everything. It's true of, like Adam, I remember talking to someone in Chicago once saying that, when you get the first day of nice weather after one of those ugly winters, everybody's outside, everybody's out, everybody's spending money, everybody's at the bars, everybody's just having a good time. And so there is like a pent up demand aspect. So be careful not to read that as the trend. Okay, let that subside a little bit. It's a couple months for pent-up demand to get out of the system. But I do think overall what's interesting, and Adam, we got to do a whole nother episode about this, because I know you're a believer in modern monetary theory, and I am not. But I will give you credit on a couple of things. It does seem pretty amazing to me that we are using a lot of spending, a lot of money printing, and only creating a somewhat small amount of inflation through it. And that sort of bodes kind of tips its hat at MMT a little bit, because all of these U.S. debts are denominated in dollars, and all the taxing has to be repaid in dollars. So it does give it that circular system. So I do buy into that to some extent. I want to give you a little cred for that.
Well,
and
I'll say this.
And that's Mike Norman that Naresh got on my show. So go ahead, Naresh.
Well, I'll say this about modern monetary theory, and really Austrian economics too. I'm open to the idea, because I think a lot of us we don't know. Like we don't know how things are going to turn out. And in the case of 2008, 2009, if you were an Austrian economist, you got your butt handed to you as an investor if you went in and shorted the US dollar and bought gold. I know that's what I did, because that's
Peter Schiff, like I've been saying, Peter Schiff, Zero Hedge, and all the others have been calling the end of the world forever, right? And they're just, so far they're always wrong. So
and so that's why I'm by no means am I like a socialist liberal Democrat, but I'm open to the idea just to see how it works out, and I think there's some interesting ideas.
Yeah.
But going to the question that you posted, he also asked
Bitcoin and metals.
Yeah, Bitcoin, gold, and also prior to the election. And so I actually think long term, I'm pretty bullish on. You've seen gold reach $2,100, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I think long term, with all this money printing, we're certainly going to see gold prices go up. I think crypto also will go up as well. But prior to the election, I think the stock market has been so key to Trump's to his resume. And if the stock market is not good come November 1st, that's really, really going to hurt him in the election. And so I think he's going to do everything possible. He and the Republicans are going to do everything possible to get the next round of stimulus passed, to put more money in businesses' pockets and people's pockets. And like Adam already said, there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines that's waiting to be deployed. So I'm actually pretty bullish. I think the Dow will cross 30,000 by November 1st. And because Trump needs it. And he usually gets what he wants. He's a fighter. And
he's a fighter, and that's one of the things I do like about him. Listen, a lot of people are going to hate you when you're draining the swamp. A lot of those swamp dwellers have been leeching off the system for forever and making all sorts of corrupt money from it. And you're going to have a lot of haters when you're a disruptor, and Trump's a disruptor. Even if you hate him, you have to just understand that concept. People hated lots of great people. People hated Martin Luther King. People hated Jesus. People hated
Gandhi. And
people hated Gandhi and Reagan, and and JFK got assassinated. Okay, so whatever, right? Just temper it. Temper your thinking there. Okay, so my buddy Mitch Russo, who's been on the show before, I wonder if now is actually a great time to look for property inside New York City, since at some point in the future, COVID will be gone and make the city will be attractive again. Mitch, that's interesting. I know you lived. I don't know if you lived in the city. I think you lived in Westchester County. I know that. And Gary, you lived right near there, so you're certainly familiar with New York City. And I know
I live
Naresh
downtown.
You live downtown.
Yeah.
I don't know. You lived right there.
Yep.
But Mitch, I'd say you're way too early.
I would say that too.
You might be 10 years early here, maybe 15 in that thinking.
There's just no blood in the streets yet. There's got to be blood in the streets before that becomes true.
Yeah.
There's no blood in the streets because there are dressers in the streets right now.
There are dressers in the streets. Yeah. Listen, I was taught never laugh at somebody else's misfortune, so I'm not going to laugh at New York's misfortune. But yeah, go ahead, Naresh.
Well, this question I've gotten like 3 or 4 times over the past 2 weeks. This is a very popular question. And I think, Jason, you can talk a little bit about the apartment complexes, because the common question I'm getting is, well, should I buy apartments in New York City? I saw that there are all these vacancies and values are going down. And my response was what you just said. Not right now, maybe wait for a year or two. But what do you think are the future of these large apartment complexes where people are piled on top of one another?
I think everybody has to realize that after COVID, there will be something else.
Yes.
Remember, we had swine flu, bird flu, all of these other things, right? And even if there isn't a something else, another virus, okay, there's going to be a post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, that'll just last in people's minds, this suspicion for many, many years to come. And it's not just about that. It's about the civil unrest too. So any of these high density, listen, if you put a lot of rats in a small space, they're going to fight, okay? You just don't want to be in a confined area. The rise of the suburbs is with us, and take advantage of that trend. It's going to be with us for a long, long time. Okay, Rob says California, New Jersey, and then what?
Florida.
Yeah, Florida. I mean, if that's your path, Florida or Texas. I mean, seriously, Rob, that's not even a question. Maybe Tennessee, okay? Maybe Washington State, but definitely not Seattle, because they're nuts. Okay, so, Sarah says, hi, guys. Hey, Sarah, thanks you're always jumping in on these meetings, and you've been on before. It's always great to have you. We got to have you back soon. Okay, I like this name. It's a gray area. I worked in transportation for metro area New York City. Possible 12% will be layoff across the board if ridership doesn't increase by October. Wow, that is yeah, and I'd say that's probably going to get even worse than that. So
that's when you hope for a union.
You're in a union, so you're going to be somewhat protected and insulated from that. But just think about the longer term. Think about getting out of there. Just think about other places you can go, other things you can do, other options, and just always have a plan B. That's what I definitely say. Paul Lund says, good morning to Sarah. All right. Rob is back. Thank you for your service, Gary. So there you go. Thank you for your service. And Karina, Dayton, Ohio. By the way, it's great when you make a question or comment, if you put your location in there. That we'd love to just kind of get a perspective where you're from. Okay. Hi, all. As future renters in Los Angeles, well, if you're going to be in Los Angeles, where I grew up, my hometown, definitely rent. Good idea. Good idea, Karina. You got that one right. Okay. What are some of the lease terms that you think are negotiable compared to pre-COVID mass migration times? We have a military move to the air. Everything is negotiable. And, in the military, and I've had a lot of military tenants over the years, they're great. You can, if you are deployed or you have orders to move, you can break your lease. So that's handy. Gary, you may have a comment on any of that. But, just negotiate anything and everything you want. I mean, finally, the terms are a little bit in your favor as a renter. So, yeah, absolutely. Oh, here's a handle for you, Stud Muffin. You live in Phoenix, Arizona. That's a great town. I really enjoyed living in Phoenix. I like it a lot. Was thinking of selling our house and cashing out a little over $100,000 in equity. As for living situation, we would move back with our parents
and live and
I'm
your
assuming.
question got cut off, and live
Oh.
rent free. So Stud Muffin is part of the boomerang generation. You're probably a millennial. Should we sell now and jump back into the market later, or do a HELOC? If you're in Phoenix, you probably got some increase in equity coming. I don't know what type of property you're in or what the price range would be. I would assume you're in kind of the more entry level side, just by what you said, moving back with parents, etc. So I would probably hold on to that property. We can't really recommend Phoenix right now ourselves because that's a hybrid market, and it's too expensive for it to make sense as investment property. But if your property's on the lower price end of the spectrum and it's not a high density condo, and it's in a decent area of Phoenix, I would say you probably should keep it.
Well, I would also say, especially in today's interest rate environment, don't go for a HELOC. Why not just do a cash out refi?
Yeah. Oh, good point. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Regardless of the environment, if I could toss for just a moment, I have a lot of clients who do this thing called velocity banking, which is doing with a HELOC what we do with life insurance policies. It's kind of storing all your cash in there and then using a HELOC to borrow against it, a line of credit. If you think about life insurance, you store cash in it, you get a line of credit from the insurance company, your cash stays there and grows. Pretty similar, right? If you have equity in your house, get a line of credit. When you want the money, you pull cash out, right? The problem though is, like Adam said, there's absolutely no reason to do it. There's no spread. But even if there was a 2% spread back, 10 years ago, I still wouldn't do line of credit because everyone learned in 08 and 09 that the bank has 100% control of that line of credit.
Right. Let me just elaborate on what Gary's saying a little bit. First off, to Adam's point, a HELOC, it doesn't have to be, but it's traditionally an adjustable rate loan, a home equity line of credit, and that's in second position. So that's more risky for the lender. So they're going to charge you a higher rate. Okay. That's the first thing to know. And to Gary's point, the HELOC, if you do not actually borrow the money on that line of credit and take it out, they can cancel the credit line at any time. So if you've got a HELOC for say $100,000, don't feel secure in that you can just rely on that money at any time and borrow it, because it can just be, they just send you a letter and say, sorry, your line's been canceled. If you don't use it. Now, if you do borrow the money off the line and say you take 50 of the $100,000 out, they can't recall that money on any terms other than what was previously agreed to, but they can cancel the other 50,000 that's unused. Okay, so Adam has the better suggestion, which is a cash out refi that's a first position loan for the entire balance. It'll have probably a 30-year fixed rate term, which is going to be much more desirable. So that's the point there. Gary, any other comments on that?
I see it super risky leaving your family's wealth in a location where somebody else has control of it, right? So if you go back to that pyramid, right, like control of the money is the primary thing that I write up there every time for my clients. And so we talked about gold. Like, is gold price going to go up or down? I don't know. It's gone up recently, but there's a huge tax on it if you try to get rid of it. So you get
28, you're going to pay like 28%, I think.
Right. And can the government confiscate it? Yes, they can. In fact, they have, right? They've done it.
1933. Yeah.
Right. And so there's some issues there, but similarly with properties, like can a government or can the equity you have in your house go away? Of course, any cyclical market it happened in, right? People had millions of dollars in California and dropped it down. Jason and I have a great friend, a mutual friend who was in Mastermind and Venture Alliance Mastermind, may still be. And he's got an $8 million house. And I keep telling him, sell the thing, or at least pull the equity out of it, right? Because you are not at all in control. So yes, the market, somebody's opinion can take away all the equity in your house. If you have a line of credit, the bank can take it away. And again, like gold, they will. It's not like they could. They did. They have, and they will again. And they're doing it right now.
Gold doesn't produce income. I'm not a gold bug at all. It's just a measuring stick. I mean, maybe you have a little bit of it, but
the precious metals are highly overrated. That's purely speculative. When the whole game's about buy low, sell high, there's just not much to that investment. We like income property because it's a multi-dimensional asset class. And now the gold color, okay, the comment is HELOC is the worst position. Yes, I agree with you. But to Gary's point, what he's recommending is something we call equity stripping. When the equity is in the property, okay, as I always say, income property is the best investment, but it's not a good bank. Okay, you don't want to keep your money in it. The property will appreciate, depreciate, produce the same amount of rental income, regardless of how much equity you have. So pull the equity out, get control of it, and use it to invest in other properties, ideally. Okay. But Gary's plan too, and he's going to talk about that. He's got some more visual aids here to cover, but I just want to knock out a few more of these questions. So Lisa is asking, if the Fed wants to create inflation expectations, why not just change the consumer price index back to what it used to be, such as by removing substitution weighting and hedonic indexing, she means to say. So the way inflation is hidden is through weighting, substitution, and hedonic indexing. I've explained this many times before. We don't have time to go into it now, but that's the way they understate the true rate of inflation. Okay, and so what she's saying is, I think she's saying is that if the government or the Fed, wanted to make everybody think more inflation was coming because they have this 2% target inflation rate that they just must achieve based on a concept called the Phillips curve. Okay, and I've got many podcasts where I talk about that. By the way, for any of information on this, you can just go to jasonhartman.com and use the search engine on the website and type in things like CPI or Phillips curve, and you'll get all my relevant podcasts or blog articles on those topics, so you can really get some good info. But if they did start using or calculating the CPI the way they used to calculate it, inflation would be much higher. But they don't want to do that. They want to hide the inflation rate. So they would not be interested in going back to the way it was. Now, what else is Lisa saying? When the government starts to report higher CPA, like what Shadow Stats is claiming, Shadow Stats is a website, and the founder is John Williams. He has been on my podcast. You can go listen to that episode. Naresh actually booked him on the show years ago. So thank you for that, Naresh. And he has a calculator on his website that will help you calculate inflation the way the government calculates it, the way they used to calculate it before. I think they've changed it many times over the years, but mostly the big change was in about 1979, I believe. And that's when they really calculated it differently. Now, here's one thing about that. Let me just say something on this, okay? And I had George Gammon on the show recently, and I don't think we aired that interview yet. But a lot of these thinkers that believe in shadow stats, and I believe in it conceptually, and John Williams is right conceptually about that. But what they never ask is this. They never ask compared to what? And here's what I mean by that in this context, okay? They never say, well, okay, if they calculated it the way they used to, then the inflation rate would be much higher. But here's the question they never ask. Just because they used to calculate it that way before 1979, for example, were they doing it right then? And the thing I think that argument, it starts to fall apart when you go to John Williams' website and you see the old way they used to calculate it. And you put in a number in that calculator and you see that inflation would be just radically higher. I mean, like it's insane. The numbers are insane. And I don't think inflation is that high in real life. I think it's higher than they're telling us it is, but not as high as the old way it was calculated. So I think there's some middle ground there that's reasonable. Okay, hey, this guy, Gary, Chris Allen. All of you do, actually. Chris Allen was in the Venture Alliance member. So he says, Gary rocks. Thank you, Chris. Yes, Gary does rock.
comment to Mr. Stud Muffin, who previously.
And Chris, we're not calling you a stud muffin, but Chris is a bit of a stud muffin. He's a bodybuilder. Yeah.
Yeah. So he said that he wanted to buy properties in the future, like in the far future. And I just wanted to say, right now is a great time. There are good deals available, and inventory is low, so it is hard to find them. But through our network, we can help you identify those. And with the interest rates so low, there's no reason to wait 2 years, 3 years, like he was alluding to, in the far future.
I agree. And so if he pulls $100,000 in equity out, or $50,000 through our network, and you can find these properties at jasonhartman.com, it'll typically take you about $25,000 for each house you buy. Okay.
Not today.
Maybe 30,000. It depends on the price of the house, obviously, but some of them will be 45,000, right? Subject to qualifying. And so, that's how you have to look at it. And you can make that money work for you much better than you can sitting in the property asleep. That money, that equity you have in your property is totally asleep. It's, what we call lazy money. So you want to use that and put it to work. And I know, folks, we have to go through some of these questions kind of fast. So obviously there's more to it. So check out the podcast, The Creating Wealth Show, and check out our YouTube channel for a lot more resources. Reach out to our investment counselors like Adam and Naresh here, who can help us, and then our special guest Gary, who can help you with these concepts as well. Okay, David says, what are the lowest tax states? Well, the lowest tax is zero, and that's Texas, Florida, Tennessee. Tennessee does have, like, they kind of hedge on a little bit. There are some particulars, but there are basically 7 to 11, depending on how you look at it, no income tax or very low income tax states. And every state is lower than the socialist republics of California and New York and Illinois. Okay. So those are the kinds of places you really want to not live in. Okay. So definitely, get to a no income tax.
Well, I'll also say, I don't know if this is Gary's thinking, but when I lived in Maryland, I wanted to live somewhere warm and somewhere low tax or no tax. So I identified only, I think it was 4 states. It was Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and I believe Nevada. Those are,
and Nevada, of course. Yep. Forgot to mention Nevada, so thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, there are a few other states like South Dakota, Wyoming, but I was in my mid-20s.
It's too cold there. Yeah.
Alaska's free.
And it's not just about income tax. It's not the only tax out there, right? So like, it's super expensive to live in Seattle, Washington, or in Washington State, and they're a tax-free state, income tax-free. So it's a package, right? Your life is a package. It's not just about income.
Absolutely. It's not just income tax. So in Texas, for example, property taxes are very high. In some states, estate taxes are very high. So you want to pick the right place to die.
I've actually been looking at a lot of it. It's kind of counterintuitive. You almost, assuming it's not a hyper cyclical state, you almost want to invest in states that have an income tax because they're less reliant on property taxes. I know you can still make it work in Florida and Texas, but you're a little bit more susceptible to the state government's need for money in regards to your property taxes. But if you're in a state with a 5, 6, 7% income tax, they're likely not going to have to focus on your property tax money in order to get the stuff they want done.
I would step back a little bit. That's a great comment. But what I would say is that pyramid thing, which represents all of our family's finances, don't expose your pyramid to what Jason said, which I think was beautiful. This needs to be one of your commandments. But don't expose your family to a place where the government is hungry, where the government is in trouble, right? Don't expose yourself to that, whether it's an investment or your personal residence, because they will eventually, they're hungry, right? Don't get in a pen with a hungry lion.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's
migrations out of these states with high taxes. So that hurts tenancy.
Yeah, it does. It does. And a lot of these, we're going to see, and folks, by the way, if you own municipal bonds You better be really, really concerned about that, because as people flee these business unfriendly, high income tax states, and the states and the area states and cities with civil unrest, okay, we are going to see very significant pressure and defaults probably on these government bonds. So be really, really careful of a whole nother part of your investment portfolio. Remember, the economy is a domino effect, right? There's this cascade of problems that comes out of when these jurisdictions don't get sufficient tax revenue. It's serious problem. So yeah, good stuff. Okay, so Mitch is back with another question about COVID. Are we creating two classes of people, those who recover and those who don't?
Yes.
And I don't think you mean that from a health perspective. I think you mean from an economic perspective. They have that the have and have nots are not going to coexist peacefully. Yeah, Mitch, you are absolutely right. Look at wealth inequality, and I hate to sound like a lefty when I talk about that, but it is a legitimate concept, okay? It is only going to get significantly worse. And what we're seeing now is the digital divide, because the digital workers, the knowledge workers, were able to work remotely and not be very affected by this whole thing. Although that effect will come and there will be more layoffs and so forth. But people who are working on a computer can work remotely, and people who are, working with their hands a lot can't, right? Now, some of them, are still very well employed, but certainly not all of them. So yes, wealth inequality definitely increasing. Carrie says, hi, Tyler. And Carrie also says, at David in Alabama, Mitch, I lived in the city in Brooklyn. Yeah. Now, Brooklyn's not doing so well either.
Well,
even
regarding that digital divide, I don't think that's specific to COVID. I mean, you had a guest on your show, Andrew Yang, Jason, who was talking about this long before the virus even hit. So
presidential candidate that you booked on my show, Andrew Yang. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. And he wrote an entire book about it. So the virus just kind of was the excuse, the acceleration, but I don't think this has been a direct response of COVID or virus.
It's just an acceleration of a trend that was already there, no question about it. Vitlaus, how do you say that? Vitlaus says the South in general. Yes, the South is where the action is, real estate wise and economics. Good people. Yes, we're all Southerners now.
When he moved south.
Yeah.
I got around my peeps.
Hey, let me tell you something. There's bad people everywhere. So even in
what I would say about good people, though, maybe this is what Vitlaus meant, but people who are not interested in controlling other people, right? So if they let you do your thing, like I walked into a restaurant, people are eating inside down here. It's crazy. And this is a hotbed, right?
Yeah.
And I walked in, I stuck my head into 7-Eleven. I'm like, do I need to put this thing on? And she's like, if you feel like it. Right. So like people are not into controlling themselves, at least it's been my local experience. So when people are into controlling you, they're pushing their will on you, which is how you get real banana republics. Right. You got to have an oppressive, controlling, rich group.
Yep.
It's never happened in America. We've been through this before. Right. We definitely had two classes in the Great Depression. Didn't happen here. I don't think a banana republic and the loss in the middle class is coming, maybe temporarily. Personally, I don't think it's coming in America because we're nowhere near, even with all the socialist ideas, we are nowhere near a country where we're willing to accept somebody oppressing somebody else, right? So as long as you can be like completely destroyed financially, dust yourself off and go, well, that didn't work. I'm going to go try this instead and become the guy who creates Facebook or the guy who creates Tesla and become a billionaire. He supposedly dethroned Ford Motor Company in less than 10 years, right? That's America. Again, the optimism.
Right. But there are lots of ways to oppress, right? Lots of subtle ways that we don't really notice that we need to start thinking about more often, for sure. But yes, the southern states,
are generally the more business-friendly states. They're right-to-work states where you're not forced to get a union to join a union if you want to get a job. And these are the places where the action is, no question about it. Okay, shout out from our offices in London. Yes, fantastic. Okay, and Tyler, Carey, yeah, okay. Well, they're just chatting amongst themselves here. Okay, like TV movies. Okay, yeah. So see home working, the future office. Yes, oh, definitely. A lot more people working at home, and I think that trend is going to stick with us long after there's a vaccine, long after people aren't very concerned about this. I think again, it's just another acceleration of the trend.
Naresh and I were actually talking together the other day, and KB Homes has introduced a whole new line of like home offices where you can buy, your custom built home, and they have a package that you can build out. It's kind of like COVID offices, they're calling it, or something like that.
Yeah. And
so it's becoming a part of it. I don't think doing something like KB Homes is offering is a good idea for resale. You want to keep it as, in my opinion, a bedroom that you can make into an office, but they're definitely offering it.
Well, the new thing is not a home office, but 2 home offices.
Yeah.
They're now these builders are now catering to this trend so much that they're literally doing dual home offices, which is, it's amazing how things have really changed.
Yeah. These things, they're offering like soundproofing. They're offering like putting in all of these. I mean, that part might be worth it, is they're putting in like all of the office amenities. I mean, maybe not do like a built-in office area, but they're offering some pretty impressive, almost like office building type upgrades to your property.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, even if you and I, Adam, don't agree with it, there are a lot of people who are interested in such products who work in technology or healthcare. We're like, okay, yeah, let's just add it in. An extra $20,000 to the home, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so Gold Color was talking about the Baltic Dry Index. Yes, I hear you. Okay, so work from home, save money, big city, crime is scary anyway. Yes, I agree with you completely. So it's a real change we're in, folks. It's a real change. Okay, let's go back and look at Gary's slides, and we'll kind of start getting to the wrap-up point here. Just had to get through some of those questions. Oh, let me share this screen again. Here you go. It's coming up, Gary. There you go. So
you talked about you were talking about locking in with a fixed rate loan and pulling equity out. I talked about getting control of that equity. It also reminded me of one of your phrases that I learned and internalized from you, Jason, which is that the best insurance policy is a high loan balance. Typically, we talk about that in asset protection.
Right.
But, if you imagine you and your next door neighbor in California in 2008 in Orange County, right? Or Manhattan Beach or Manhattan, what's it called? Not Manhattan.
Manhattan Beach. Yeah.
So
or Manhattan, New York.
So the two of you have, a $2 million property, and that's going to be, you're going to use that equity to live on when you retire. $2 million is tiny. Let's call it 5. All right. Out there. And so one of you is going to just kind of, use a line of credit and pull their money. The other person sells it, moves somewhere else, or maybe they sell it and rent it back from the guy, but they have locked in $5 million. Now, if the market votes, you don't have to go back and ask somebody's permission to get access to that money. It's yours. It's in your control. So to me, that's a huge thing. Control is huge. And it's also, as you point out all the time, Jason, it protects you from having that, losing that risk by somebody stealing it, somebody having a frivolous lawsuit to get it. So that's what I was looking for when I first started doing this with investment properties, is not taking money I had at risk in the markets and putting it at risk in properties. Mm-hmm. And so you taught me that and kind of helped me along this. I credit you with helping me along this path. Yeah. This picture is just about opportunity cost. Like you mentioned that when you first showed it.
Gary, let me just mention something on what you're saying there. The idea is this, and I learned this when I was 19 years old, going to real estate seminars. The idea is, conceptually, now this isn't, I don't mean this in a legal sense, I mean it in a conceptual sense, what I'm about to say. The idea is own nothing, control everything. Meaning that, don't have a lot of equity in your properties, but have the control over them. Have them provide you with the benefits. of ownership. You do own them. Okay. But, you could say conceptually, well, the bank really owns it because my loan balance is so high. I only own 20% of it. The bank owns 80% of it. Right. And that's the idea. Every time you see these natural disasters, the people who get all the breaks and the help and the assistance and the bailouts are the people who had high loan balances. Now, I did one video on my YouTube channel where I was last year. We were on a cruise in Scandinavia, and from the deck of that cruise ship, I did a video on the few times that you should pay cash for a property or pay off a mortgage. It's pretty rare. There's a couple of instances where you might think about it, but mostly have a high loan balance because and it's counterintuitive to a lot of people. Certainly the Dave Ramsey crowd will not understand what I'm saying, but that gives you the most protection and the lowest risk. Also, Gary, before you finish, I just want to give a shout out. We got a whole slew of other questions and we're just not going to be able to get to them, but I want to give a shout out to my dear friend and former assistant, Karen Markovich, out there watching, and our client and my friend, Jeff Liu and Victor and Woo Carol Lynn and Michael. We see all you and Matt and all of the rest of you watching, and my mom watching too. So good stuff. I know there's a whole bunch more I didn't say. So anyway, we appreciate you tuning in. Gary, go ahead.
So this is just an example to remind us of the power of compound interest, really is it. So what I personally do is I store my money in a life insurance vehicle. Why do I do that? Because it's private and protected and it grows at, let's call it 5%. In this picture, I'm assuming 6%. But it grows without the impact of tax, right? And so there's a lot of benefits of why I store it there instead of a traditional savings account. But if you just store it in a traditional savings account, it still has a lot of the value associated with this. So rather than put the $50,000 into the down payment on, let's say, a duplex or a fourplex, if you have the money stored in a location where you can get a line of credit on it, then using somebody else's money, using 100% other people's money. So make sure my example is understood. $400,000 building, and I want to put 50. I have to put 50 in, and that 50 can either come out of my pocket and force my money to stop doing anything for the next 25 years, or I can borrow from somebody else, make them put their money into the property, and I can keep my money doing something useful. Mm-hmm. So if I have it in a savings account, I empty the savings account, and then I pay the principal, if you will, to refill the 50 back into that savings account. Or I can leave mine in my alternative savings account and then borrow it from somebody else and repay them the principal as well. So the principal is kind of off the picture here. If you use 50, you got to pay it back somehow, right? Either into your own account or to somebody else. What I'm talking about is, what about that 50 and what does it do? So if I go buy a property and put my money in as a down payment, it's kind of like I go to closing at the house, I sign all the papers, and they open the floorboard and there's this firebox down there. I stuff my down payment in the firebox, and it's stuck until I sell the property, right? I just sold some properties in St. Louis. I finally got the down payment back from 10 years ago, right? So if I can borrow somebody else's money, two things are true. This is what the primary residence, 15-year mortgage guys that tell you to pay your residences off. They talk about half the story. One thing is true. On the top of this picture up there, if I borrow 50 grand from somebody and pay them back over 25 years at a 6% interest rate, which is a pretty high interest rate right now, I have to pay them as much, basically $47,000. So basically the same amount as the principal, and they will beat you with this fact all the time. Do you know if you buy a $300,000 house, you're going to pay almost $300,000 in interest? That's totally true. It's also one half the story, and in my opinion, not the important half, right? The other half of that story is I didn't lock my money up. If I can have my money grow for me and do something for me, and I know how to do at least 6% with it, then I get the compounding return on it. And so if I put my money in a savings account earning 6% with no taxes, it will turn into 215 over that same period of time. So to summarize this picture, I can pay 47 that everybody tells me not to do and make 165 on it. And to me, that's the value of not locking your money up and using other people's money when you can.
This is, a lot of this stuff we're talking about, because you alluded to it earlier, Gary, this is the concept of arbitrage. You know, arbitrage is a cool sounding word, but I like to really simplify everything. And it just means taking advantage of or exploiting the differences in things. That's what it means to me. Okay. Like, people talk about derivatives. I call derivatives the thing about the thing. Like it's just you got to have this be more simple so we really get the impact of it, right? And that's definitely true. So you want to arbitrage your money to make it work for you as much as possible. Okay, so tell us about this one, Gary.
So this is just simply, I just wanted to show an example. Some people you'll hear call this thing the and asset. I don't talk about it a lot like that, but really what it just means is that when you access the value of your money, you're doing it via line of credit, guaranteed line of credit from an insurance company. And that means that your money is not taken off the table. So when I borrow from my 401k, the money's on the sideline. It's not there anymore. When I borrow from somebody else or when I take money out of my checking account, it's not doing its previous job. In this case, it continues to sit in the background and doing what it was doing before, growing in a tax-free compounding environment, while I get the value of it by borrowing somebody else's money. That's all it really is intended to be. And I guess also it's pointing out the fact that you can use the money for whatever you want to use it for. It's your cash. Use it for a doodad, use it for an investment like I do, anything you want to do. Fund kids' college, that's a bad idea, but do it if you want.
Well, and the reason you say that is because college is a scam. and it wouldn't be a scam if it was reasonably priced and if they weren't brainwashing these kids. But since they are doing both of those things, it's a scam. So, yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. All right. Okay. So what about this one?
So you'll hear a lot of misconceptions. Not misconceptions. They're out of context. You'll hear people talk about you can't do what Gary's talking about. You can't get access to your money. I talked to my buddy and he said that you can't immediately access the money. So just to reiterate my story, when I learned about this approach, I was already in contract on my first property. I needed $80,000 for a down payment on this large new construction property. I said, stop. Put my life insurance policy in place, put the money there, and 3 days later, use those dollars or the value of those dollars to close on the property. So you can do it immediately. You can access a large portion of it from the very beginning. And so really, this picture is just intended to say that if somebody's saying you can't do it, they're talking about the beautiful, wonderful picture on the left-hand side, which is a normal old school life insurance policy. It's a great product. It's not a great bank, at least not early. And so we adjust it. So you need to make sure you just go to a specialist who understands how to optimize this to be both a bank and life insurance. That's really the point.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So Robert says, big fan from Huntington Beach, California. Love your content. Thank you, Robert. And we're happy to do them for you. And hey, none other than our own Adam. He couldn't get a word in edgewise, so he just posted a question himself or a comment. Yeah.
No, that was in response to Juan Jamie asking about finding the best neighborhoods to acquire rentals.
Yeah.
And talking to property managers and realtors.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. So this one says, I filled up 10 of my conventional loan slots and am hungry for more income properties. Best options for financing properties 11 through 100. I love it. Here, you know, for this one, Robert needs applause. My little applause machine right here. Good job, Robert, and good thinking big. That's fantastic. Good for you. So reach out to our investment counselors. I don't know, maybe Adam or Naresh or Carrie or Sarah or someone you're engaging with. What?
I responded. Go to the next one.
Oh, okay. So we have solutions for you. Okay, so this is Tyler. Yes, but like 5% cash on cash. COC means cash on cash. That's a return metric. By the way, I meant to mention earlier, if you want to do some studying, today is your last chance to get $100 off the recordings of our 22nd annual Meet the Masters of Income Property. This is scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Just go to jasonhartman.com/recordings. jasonhartman.com/recordings, and the $100 discount ends today. So go and take advantage of that. And also on this, if you want to really understand all the metrics on how to analyze a property investment,
get a free video. It's 27 minutes long, a free video on the front page of the website, jasonhartman.com. And it'll just teach you how to analyze a deal. Okay, so that's what Tyler's referring to here. He says, I only want 5% cash on cash, or above, I'm assuming. Okay, but in a neighborhood that's been rising at 18% annually. What the heck?
A lot of extra equity for you.
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal if something's going up at 18% annually. Okay, but what about cash flow? I'd rather put 50,000 into a property, but have cash flow 900 gross each month, for example. This is the problem with not taking questions orally. I don't know exactly what you're getting to.
I guess my picture, because it was 50,000. I think that's what they're referring to.
Yeah. So I think what they're saying is, should I put a lot down and improve my monthly cash flow, or put 100% down, or get lower cash flow by getting more leverage, putting less money down? Without equivocation, in almost every case ever, put the minimum amount down that you can qualify for a good quality long-term fixed rate loan, and use as much leverage as possible. Cash flow is overrated. Now, don't take that out of context, folks, because I know someone's going to write some nasty, stupid comment where they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Okay, I would rather have my money available to me in the bank, and I don't even like the bank. Okay, than I would stuck in a property. All right. The property, the concept is own nothing, control everything. Okay. So you're better to own, in quotes, not legally, just conceptually, 20 or 25% of that asset, and have the bank own, conceptually, 80% or 75%. In other words, that's the loan they've put on the property, because you control everything. You still get all the tax benefits, all the appreciation benefit, all the other benefits of ownership by having less money in the deal. So if that is your question, JJ, and I'm not totally sure it is, that's my answer. Use leverage. Okay. Michael says, Gary is 100% right. I leverage whole life insurance policies. It does take time to build up the same way. Heads I win, Tails You Lose is a great read, and I highly recommend. All right, Michael. Yeah.
Well, I'll also say I use my whole life policy. So I'm a client, and I own, between my wife and me, 3 whole life policies. I use one of them to fund my real estate deals. I have been for the last 3 years or so, and I love it. It's such a beautiful, flexible, versatile vehicle. Not just to buy real estate, but even if you just need a cash infusion for anything, you always have access to it. It's like your own personal bank. And I know in my latest policy, I get a guaranteed 4.5% return year over year.
And Naresh, for the next time, try and fix your audio. It's hard to hear you. Okay, so just for your next point, but we got what you said there. Okay, yeah. Muthaya says, good stuff, Jason. Hey, thanks, Muthaya. Thanks for always engaging with our stuff. And Juan says, thanks, Adam.
Hey, I have a question for Gary. Mm-hmm. Gary, when it comes to, you were showing the example of taking out the loan from your whole life. How do those rates compare to like getting your conventional loan or portfolio lenders? Like right now, if I were to take money out of my whole life, kind of what rate roughly am I taking it out at?
Right. So I'm going to be Mr. English teacher for a moment, because I think it's important to just kind of reiterate the approach. So you're actually borrowing money from the insurance company, leaving yours there and using it as collateral. Okay. Right. And so it's 5% as a floor for almost all of these insurance companies. And it can go up from there. It hasn't in over 10 years, but it is possible because they're really tied to Moody's long-term corporate loan rate, right? So what the insurance companies and the banks can earn if they lend the money out there. So you've always got first right of refusal. You can say, no, don't lend that to Caterpillar. I want to borrow it. And they would give it to you. You have a guaranteed access to it. But whatever the rate is out there that the money would have gotten, they're going to ask you for it. But again, it's been 5% for a long time, but 5% is kind of high right now. And so there's alternatives, because every large banking institution in the country, and the Federal Reserve, by the way, recognize this stuff as something called Tier 1 capital assets. This in U.S. Treasuries, which I don't know how long U.S. Treasuries are going to hold that, but But when the Fed lends money to major banks, they require them to have 20% of their money in tier 1, which is life insurance on their executives or US Treasuries, right? So they'll lend the money too. For example, I'm working personally with a bank that will give me 3.25% on 95% of my money. So you can go to another source as well. They see it as just, good as gold kind of liquid asset. Does that answer it, Adam?
Yeah. So you can get 3.5, but you have to just go to outside source.
Yeah, and it's a little more restricted, meaning that you have to make a monthly interest-only payment on it from a normal line of credit like that. So from an insurance company, there's no requirement at all. One of those questions there about the cash flow, like, well, what if I borrow from the insurance company, I'm 100% leveraged, I may not have any cash flow. Yes, but remember the control word. So if you're borrowing, using the money as the loan as your down payment, and you get tight on cash flow for some reason, just stop paying back that loan. Don't stop paying back the lender, the primary lender, but you can do it to the insurance company as long as you want, right? So there's a little bit of difference there.
Folks, we promised that this was the topic of today's talk.
Otherwise, Jason, or I won't. You won't get there.
Yeah, I have got to at least fulfill the promise here. So let me just go over a couple quick slides. And first of all, I don't know if you saw this, but there's a new Monopoly game out. Who sent this to me? Was it Adam? Maybe. Monopoly Socialism. Yeah, winning is for capitalists. Yes, it is. And in the game, when you pass go, instead of collecting $200, each player gets $50. Socialism sucks. Okay, so we did that. This was interesting on the history of bubbles, but we're not going to go into that. This is what I want to talk about. This is from the Mises Institute. They've been on the podcast several times, and they're all the investors are worried about the CDC and that kind of stuff. And we just briefly touched on it at the beginning, but I want to just highlight a couple things they said, which is interesting here. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, operating under Health and Human Services, has asserted jurisdiction over private residential leases. Folks, like I said on the podcast the other day, I don't think this is going to fly. Okay. There will be so many legal challenges to this. I can't imagine the CDC is just not going to get slapped for overstepping their bounds here completely. Okay. But, and I got to move my computer here to read this. Hope that gets out of the way there. I know it's covering part of the screen, but again, this was announced without congressional input. This is key, or approval, and purely by administrative decree. That means fiat, like you always hear about fiat money, right? Fiat means by decree, by authority. The dollar has value because by fiat, they said, under the legal tender laws that it is, usable for all debts, public and private, right? So at least the eviction and mortgage moratoriums in the CARES Act passed by Congress, okay, in March, they were enacted by politicians who face voters, right? This is just administrative. That's why I don't think this thing will fly in a million years, okay? And it's constitutionally suspect, they say, this is just not going to fly. So stop freaking out about this. It's just not going to be a big concern. But highlighted in red, it says, even during the most turbulent periods in American history, including the Great Depression in the 30s, World War II in the 30s and 40s, and the 1880s tuberculosis outbreak, which killed 1 in 7 people, okay? Virtually no one expected the federal government to suspend rent, okay? Right? This action by the CDC in response to a very manageable and retreating cold virus, they're maybe minimizing it a little bit, but whatever, is the kind of quietly unprecedented development we've come to expect this year. It's wrongly attributed to Rahm Emanuel, who said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? The first chief of staff for the Obama regime, the oppressive Obama regime. But it's really Winston Churchill, I think, who originated that saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I love Winston Churchill, right? But that's exactly what's happening here. That's exactly what's happening. This watershed moment for the U.S., when you destroy trust in the contract enforcement, you create a terrible ripple effect, or terrible ripple effects throughout society. Something this radical should not be rushed into in place with such little forethought, especially when it amounts to buying votes in a national election. But of course, in a managerial state, we should expect this type of short-sighted political consideration. This is just ridiculous, folks. This is never going to fly. Now, under something like the Kamala Harris regime, if it comes to that, hopefully it won't, this is exactly the kind of thing you'll see in all parts of our life. Okay, so interesting stuff. Okay, now I wanted to get to one other thing. I was going to go through this. We'll do it next week. But on personal savings rates, because this we talked about, go to jasonhartman.com/recordings. Remember, we are capitalist here. This is on sale today only. Okay,
did you also want to talk about why the CDC thing won't even really matter for us, potentially?
Well, why? What were you
because
getting to?
First off, your tenant is going to have to prove that it's COVID related.
Yes.
I mean, they have to.
They have actual CDC documents there.
They have to sign legal documents saying that. You can also still evict people if they trash your house. You can still evict them. If they're not paying and it's not COVID related, you can still evict them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it limits it quite a bit.
This is just everybody's like overreacting to this. It's just not that big a deal.
And
at least not yet.
If they don't pay you now, it's still due. It's not that it's just waived. It's still due, and you might have to go after them after they leave your property, but you'll still get a judgment against them. You can still go after them. It's not killing you. Might be a minor inconvenience to you.
Well, it's more than a minor inconvenience, but yes, we are, Adam, you're being too optimistic. It's a major inconvenience, but hopefully it won't be an issue. Okay, this is the chart I was looking for. Personal savings rate. I mean, look at this. This is a staggering chart. It really is. But this should be considered good news, actually. Okay. So here, we bump along at 7.7%. And here we're at 7.7%. And then the lockdowns begin and the personal savings rate, people just stop spending money. It skyrockets to over 32% here. Okay. And now we see lockdowns lifted in many places. Personal savings rate drops. Okay. Remember, the politicians hate this because initially it's bad, right? You got to have people spending to keep the economy going. Silly George Bush post 9/11, he says, go shopping. Idiotic. And listen, he's a Republican. So George Bush was actually a Democrat who believed in God. Okay, most Democrats just believe in government, so that's the difference. He was really a Democrat, but he called himself a Republican. And anyway, personal savings rate. This is good news, folks. This ought to be considered good news that people are saving more money. Maybe they'll get in the habit of saving a little more money. Adam,
that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. That it's right at April when it spikes, and guess when the COVID checks went out?
Yeah.
The COVID checks went out in April. You got your check then. And like I was saying, everybody just deposited in the bank. So that's why it spikes so high.
I thought they put it into Robinhood. But who, by the way, is under investigation now, and Robinhood is going to be hit with like a $10 million fine for not disclosing the fact that they were selling your trades. You thought it was free. They were selling the high frequency firms who, weren't giving you the best deal on your trade, I guess. So that's the allegation, at least.
A $10 million fine, and they probably made $150 million.
Bazillion, yeah. That's the way it always is.
That's a good tax rate right there.
Yeah, it is. It is, definitely. All right. Hey, folks, we got a couple more questions, and then let's wrap this thing up here, okay? So Muthaya says, you missed my previous comments about Gary and the wealth maximization account. I did? I don't think so. I'm just going down the list here, but I'll look for him, Muthaya. Gary, you want to talk about that?
So he's my client, and so I'm hoping they're positive comments.
They may be negative.
But I definitely do. Before we read it, let me just reiterate. I love you, Matthias.
Let's see here. I don't know. I didn't see another comment.
I didn't see it either. I'm not sure it made it on.
I'm looking. This is dead air, folks. Talk about something while I'm looking.
Well, my biggest thing about the CDC and the health department is the same issue I had back when Department of Labor under Obama decided that it was their job to determine that people in the insurance industry should be fiduciaries. Now, of course, it makes sense. Fiduciary means operating in the best interest of your client. That's not why they did it, though. They did it so that the SEC could, kind of push things back towards the stock market. My point, though, is that it is not the health department's job to make that kind of decision. They are 100% out of their lane. And if I know Trump at all, Trump's going to say, it's not your job. Shut up. That's not going into law. That's my opinion.
Muthaya, there is definitely no other question from you here. I only see this one and the other one we put up that says, hi, Gary. Okay.
Hey,
sorry.
Gary?
Didn't make it on.
When it comes to the whole life, you were showing the chart that said, that kind of talked about startup costs and how, but then the rest of it was liquid. What kind of startup costs are we talking about? So like if I had 40 grand and I wanted to buy a property, and let's say I needed 40 grand for the down payment, what kind of money am I looking to put in initially to be able to pull out 40 grand a couple days later?
Yeah, so that each part of your first 2 years worth of contributions has a separate job. 80% approximately, 75% if you want to be super conservative, of the money going in is, you can think of it as money you're putting into your bank account. And that's the money that's liquid to be able to use. The other 20 to 25% has a different job. That money is held back by the insurance company for 1 year and then the second year. And they use the profits from that. They put it to work in the economy like they do the other money. And they use the profits from it to overcome their startup costs. There's a lot of people out there that will tell you, hey, well, the first year commission goes to the agent. Wouldn't that be awesome? And then the second year goes to the company's businesses, or expenses. That part's illiquid. So to answer your question, 20 to 25%, depending on how you design it, is not accessible.
Okay, so you need to put in like 50 grand in order to pull out 40, roughly?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Folks, by the way, some of your questions are not coming through. I've got two phones here, okay? And on one, I'm watching one of our Facebook feeds. On the other, I'm watching our YouTube feed. And so, yeah, some of these questions are definitely not coming through. So sorry about that, folks. Most of you are clients from what I can tell. So, get with your investment counselor and, sorry. Last week, we didn't have time to answer. We usually don't have time to answer every question, but we love your questions. So we try to get to them. Okay, so James was asking, should I buy this house? And I already read his question. My answer is not as a rental. No, you should definitely not buy that house in the Inland Empire of Southern California as a rental. But if you're going to live there, then, there's a whole series of psychological things that come up, and you may want to buy it for your own place to live in. It sounds like it's definitely not a terrible deal, but it still doesn't make sense as a rental, even if you get a discount on it. So I would say no, don't buy it, because you could buy 2 to 4 nice houses through our network, and you could have much better cash flow and much better metrics. Okay, and that's part of the same question. Yeah, well, no, Adam says, are you certain it's worth that much? Good question, Adam. Thank you for that. Pretty certain, had it appraised. Okay, well, appraisers are wrong all the time.
Well, not only that, but he had it appraised now, and if people keep fleeing California, 3 months from now, they might say, oh, just kidding, it's worth $350.
Yeah. You don't know. But the Inland Empire, at least, is a suburban, low-density market. It's not super expensive. So, it's not going to be the worst deal ever. It's just not going to be great as a rental. It's just too expensive to make a good rental. The rent to value ratio on a property that expensive is never going to be good. Okay. So that's one thing to know. Okay, LA Kitchen. We've got a lot of California people here. Why did Adam not allow answer to financing properties 11 through 100? I don't see any response in the chat. Well, I think, Adam, you were just kind of like it's your client, so you were already answering that question directly,
well,
right?
I don't know. I don't really know how YouTube chats work, honestly. I put an @ sign for him so that I thought it would like tell
Tag
him.
him. Yeah.
But basically, what all I said was reach out to us. We have portfolio lenders. I don't have their name and number and email available right now at my hands to put in there. So just reach out to us, and we have portfolio lenders available.
Portfolio lenders and commercial lenders will loan on, once you have your 10 properties, and if you're married, you could do 20, 10 per spouse if the other spouse can qualify if they're working and they have income. But these portfolio lenders and commercial lenders that we have access to can finance an unlimited number of properties. The rates aren't quite as good. The terms aren't quite as good. But you know what? They're not too bad. I mean, it's nice. And this is what another great thing about capitalism. Hats off to capitalism. Yay. Another great thing about capitalism is that when there is a need in the market, somebody comes in to fill it. Okay. So that's exactly what happens.
I mean, right now you can get Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan for 4%. Even if you're going 2% over for portfolio, let's just say, so you're at 6%. I was getting Fannie Mae loans at 6% 3-4 years ago. Yeah. So you can still cash flow at that. Obviously, your cash flow is going to be a little lower, but a 6% interest rate is, all told,
very good. Yeah, very good. Okay, so I will answer another question from LA Kitchen. No, captive insurance is totally different than this. And Gary, I don't know how much you know about captive insurance. I know about it because I've researched it. And captive insurance is basically where you create your own insurance company. You got to be pretty wealthy to make the numbers work on this deal and have at least a business, if not multiple businesses. But these captive insurance companies that wealthier people with net worths of, north of 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars set up, they can work. And they're usually these offshore insurance companies, a lot of times in Bermuda. That's an insurance capital of the world. And you can basically provide insurance to your businesses or your real estate portfolio potentially. And there are some good tax benefits, but it's pretty expensive and complicated to set it up. I'm sure Mitt Romney, for example, has captive insurance plans, and Donald Trump probably has captive insurance plans. But this is not for people that are worth under $10 million. I would say most of the time.
You got to have a real business too. You got to have an actual insurance need, right? So, yeah. If you have a plumbing company and a bunch of trucks and a lot of risk there, then you can do it.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. So this is not captive insurance. That's not what we've been talking about today. But maybe if you're just curious, we'll do another show on it. I have done some podcasts on that subject. So that's the scoop. Okay, folks, we have been on for 2 hours and 6 minutes. Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Oh, gosh, one last jab at me. Olaf says, why you gotta be a gold hater, Jason? Listen,
it's just a mineral.
Some of my companies have some precious metals, okay, that they own. I view it as simply insurance. I don't think it's a very great investment. It's a one-dimensional asset class. I like multi-dimensional asset classes. The whole game with gold is buy low, sell high. That's it. And when you sell, you're going to pay some very high taxes on selling. There's no great tax treatment like with income property. There's no cash flow. There's no leverage. I agree conceptually it is insurance. I talk about gold a lot on my podcast because it is a good measuring stick, but I do not think it's anything great as far as an investment. I think it's speculative. I think Bitcoin is speculative. Silver at least has a more industrial use. But I'm just not a fan of things that don't produce income. Folks, I'll leave you with this concept. And I've said it many times. To consider something an investment, it has to produce income. It has to produce income. Okay. And then he says, "You're burning my ears, friend." Sorry. And look at this one. Gold is for bribing the guards. I love that. That's good. That's good. And there's Peter Schiff said that Bitcoin is fool's gold. Yeah, I know. The interesting thing is both Peter Schiff and Max Kaiser have been on my podcast over the years. And Max Kaiser loves Bitcoin and Peter Schiff loves gold. So these two are both interesting to listen to. I think they're probably both wrong in the ultimate sense of it. Income property is the most historically proven asset class in the entire world, and it's multidimensional. Bitcoin, gold, speculative, one-dimensional asset classes. Naresh, give us a closing comment. Adam, and then Gary, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, my closing comment, I want to go back to really the point of this discussion, and that was the evictions. And that's, again, one of the most common questions I get. It's, how do you handle the evictions that are going on right now? Aren't a lot of people going to stop paying rent? And I actually, personally, I own 8 properties, and I evicted 2 of my tenants during this window in August. And one of the tenants filed for personal bankruptcy and agreed as a part of their settlement that they would pay rent moving forward. So I essentially had to forgive 3 or 4 months of rent.
That's pretty bad. Yeah. Wow. That's not good. Yeah. But overall, I mean, in surveying our clients and looking at my own portfolio, people are paying. I mean, all this like drama about people not paying rent is it just seems like the news media kind of caught on to this and they're making it a much bigger deal than it is. Have you had, Adam, Naresh, both of you, have you had clients saying that, people are doing rent strikes or any significant, there are always collection issues, long before COVID came along, right? With rent, if, people owe you money, they're not always going to pay. That's life. But I don't think COVID has really made any difference as far as our stuff goes. Now, in big institutional apartment buildings, there's definitely, been some collection issues. But in our stuff, not really.
Well,
Adam or Naresh?
Yeah, I'll say this. This is nothing new. Eviction is not unique to COVID. And for me, I'm treating this as a learning experience. And I will also say the government had this program, the EIDL. So everybody knows about the PPP program, but they also had the EIDL program to help real estate, investors, I think, with their LLCs. And I got $2,000 in just grant money from the government. And that was essentially, hey, we know that you're going to have some evictions. Hopefully this will help mitigate your losses. Yeah. So I did get that back in like May. And who knows if there will be
you got money from both programs and PPP too, right?
I did. For my other S Corp, I got PPP money. And then for the LLC, I got EIDL money.
Good stuff.
And then as far as my other tenant goes who I'm evicting, we'll see what happens there. But it's looking like if the writ is approved by the court, then the sheriff is going to send his people and we'll have to take them out of the home.
So they are working, and that part of the thing is too, you own properties in landlord-friendly states. So you're not getting caught up in, some leftist mess where, the landlord is instantly guilty because you're the big evil landlord. And
rich multi-millionaire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks for sharing that, Adam.
I haven't heard anything from my clients about any eviction issues. The only issues that one of my clients had and that I had myself is we had a vacancy right at the beginning of COVID, and that caused a little bit longer lease up time just because the whole situation, some people, it was just harder to find a tenant. But my thing right now is I have a lot of people just asking me, hey, should I hold on to my cash for the glut of inventory that's going to come whenever all the eviction moratoriums are lifted and everything. And I just,
speculators
here before, I don't think that big glut is going to happen because the government knows a lot of these people lost their job because of them. So I don't see a massive surge of inventory. Hopefully, the best I'm hoping for right now is we get back to our pre-COVID levels of inventory, which was low, but not insanely low like right now.
Yeah,
right now, our renovated property market is almost non-existent. We're pretty much only selling new construction. There's a fair amount of new construction either in Florida or Alabama or some in Georgia. And the price points on those aren't terrible. The returns are pretty good.
But they are going up because of the cost of lumber and other building materials.
Yeah, I mean, and right now with our Alabama properties are being sold like as they're finishing. Some of our Florida ones, you can, go under contract and put a binder in and it locks the price. So even as, the lumber prices go up, they can't increase your cost. So, I mean, waiting, I don't know if that's going to be a good play.
Yeah, I think it's totally speculative, and people that try to time the market never win. So I agree. Yes, don't try and time the market. Okay, so Olaf, who was asking about gold earlier, thanks for answering. I'll be looking into acquiring rental property. I just know it's tough to get cash flow positive property in Portland. Oh, don't buy in Portland. Oh, Olaf, buy some gold instead. Portland is a mess. Oh my gosh, it's such a mess there. Yeah, Portland doesn't work. It didn't work before COVID. It didn't work before, these crazy riots. And it's not going to work. So it's not landlord friendly. The prices are too high to get good rent to value ratios and good cash flow. So reach out to us, jasonhartman.com. And again, everybody, watch that free video. In 27 minutes, you will learn how to be an expert investor. Just go to jasonhartman.com. It's right on the front page, that free video, 27 minutes. And just put your name in, get the video. And that will really, really take you through every number you want to analyze on analyzing a real estate deal. So that'll really help you, Olaf. And then, of course, I see that some of you are buying the recordings. So thanks for buying those, jasonhartman.com/recordings. Gary, what say you? Wrap it up for us.
So I would also plug jasonhartman.com/start. I think it's start.
That's the Quick Start. Yes, the Quick Start podcast. Yeah.
A lot of great podcasts, a series of them that talk about the 10 Commandments and other things. So I shoot people there all the time. So very thankful.
Whoever picked those episodes to put up there was a genius.
It's not self-serving though, but I did.
Well, listen, Gary doesn't get any money for this. Okay, he's a client, and he just really dove into the content of all those podcasts, and he says, here are some hand-picked podcast episodes because we've got almost 1,600 episodes. It's just overwhelming, right? Pick some and make it the Quick Start version. So we did, and that was a great idea. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It helped me out too, though, because I have a lot of people asking for, how can I get some hard-hitting podcasts? So, but anyway, very thankful. And if any of you out there listening, my message resonated with you, then please reach out to me, because I only want to surround myself with people who are like-minded, people who this message resonates with. And it's not out yet, but I'll plug, and it's coming soon. My podcast, Gary's Gulch, which is obviously a play on Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. And it's an intention to get people focused on what our founding fathers started as an experiment 250 years ago.
I love it. Gary's Gulch from Atlas Shrugged, which is a fantastic book. If anybody hasn't read it, when you got time to gulp down 1,200 pages, it's a great read. And the whole theme of the book is, who is John Galt? So we will see you next week right back here at the same time. And this was 2 hours and 17 minutes. This is a record podcast. I want to thank all of our guests for being here. Thank you guys very much, everybody. Happy investing. We're at jasonhartman.com or 1-800-HARTMAN. If you're in the United States, that number is 1-800-HARTMAN. You can also call us on the phone. Thanks for checking in, everybody. We appreciate all your questions and comments. Thank you. Bye.